This week, the veteran climate organizer Bill McKibben was asked by the news outlet Notice if he was worried about people from his grassroots organization showing up to these protests and being labeled domestic terrorists. Bill McKibben told them, quote, "Our average age is in the mid-70s. I think our gray-haired presence alone will help make it clear what nonsense this is. Older Americans were proudly overrepresented at the first No Kings Day, and we aim to make that happen again." Joining us now is Bill McKibben. He's an environmental writer. He's also the founder of Third Act for Americans age 60 and older who are out there working for change. Mr. McKibben, thanks very much for being here. I know it's a big night.
Rachel, what a pleasure to be with you.
Tell me about this, what I described as kind of a sneer, this sort of criticism that has been levied by Republicans, by defenders of President Trump, but even sometimes by people on the other side of the aisle, people who might consider themselves to be on the left or in the center, saying that older people participating in these protests in such large numbers is somehow a bad thing, is somehow some sort of strategic weakness. I've never seen it that way myself, but I feel like you hear that critique a lot.
Yeah, I think just the opposite. I think one reason that older people have been turning out in such large numbers, and they have been heavily overrepresented in these demonstrations, is because everybody can tell, with a heart, can tell that the Trump regime is bad news. But if you have 15 presidents in your experience, you know that it's not just bad news. You know that it's utterly different from every president that we've ever lived through before, good or bad, that this is a complete rupture with the America that we knew. And I think that may strike old people harder. We've certainly noticed at Third Act that there's a huge willingness of people to be out in the street over and over again. And not just at these demonstrations. You'll remember a couple of weeks ago, Stephen Miller was boasting about how well things were going with the federal occupation of D.C. He said, "The one problem we're having is that all these elderly hippies are out there yelling at us. Time for them to go take a nap." Well, we're not taking a nap. We're rising up.
Tell me about the sort of intergenerational dynamics that you're seeing, too, because particularly on days like the huge No Kings protests back in June, I think we're going to see numbers along those lines or even larger tomorrow, particularly on days when there's tons of people protesting. Obviously, numbers that big, you're going to have everybody protesting. You're going to have everybody from 0 to 99 out there. What are the kinds of intergenerational dynamics that you're seeing between older people and young people? What does it add to the environment of those protests to have older people in such a big, rich part of the mix?
We've noticed all along that there's an enormous pleasure for younger people in seeing that older people, boomers, silent generation, are not abandoning them, leaving the mess behind for them to clean up, but are showing up and trying to do something about it. When we first launched Third Act, we were doing a big climate protest in Boston, and it was led by high school students, but they asked us to come along. And so at the front of the march, because they're Spire, there were 400 or 500 high school kids. They know the trouble we're facing. But at the back, there were a bunch of us from this nascent Third Act with a big banner that just said, "Fossils against fossil fuels." And all the kids who saw it started laughing, but they started laughing in part out of a sense of relief. A lot of that climate anxiety you hear about is just this sense that they've been abandoned. I'm going to be in Lexington, Massachusetts tomorrow on the Battle Green. When I was a high school kid myself, I grew up in Lexington, and I spent my summers giving tours of the Battle Green, telling the story of what was, in essence, the first No Kings protest. And so it feels really good for me to be coming full circle there tomorrow. And I know that there'll be lots and lots of high school kids there. The circle turns, and I think that's the great hope. Remember, if you're in your 60s or 70s or 80s now, your first act was precisely in that period of social, cultural, political transformation when women became a full part of public life, the apex of the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the first Earth Day. It's very much in our generation's muscle memory, if you will.